Inside New Orleans Sports with Eric Asher is underwritten by...
At Villeries Florist, we deliver the magic of flowers 7 days a week to the North Shore and South Shore in the New Orleans area. Whether it's for birthday parties, baby celebrations, Villeries provides colorful floral displays for all. With a store full of fresh-cut flowers, exotic tropical flowers, orchids, roses, and even fruit baskets, our goal is to make your vision a reality. Villeries Florist, proudly serving Louisiana since 1969.
Homeowners insurance increasing or deductible too high? Call, click, or come in. Save it, Dave. Dave Miette Insurance Agency.
For over 48 years, Southern Tires and Auto Repair has provided services across the New Orleans metro area. Southern Tires offers a range of tires for all vehicles and ATVs. We also have a full suite of auto repair options, including brake repair, rim repair, custom exhaust, steering and suspension, tire siping, and so much more. Southern Tires and Auto Repair, 2550 Hickory Avenue in Metairie.
C&C Drugs is a family-owned pharmacy that's been serving Southeast Louisiana for over 50 years. Whether you need help taking care of an elderly family member, a growing child, or even a pet, C&C provides patient-centered care for your entire family. C&C Drugs, large enough to serve you, small enough to know you. Locations in Mandeville and Araby.
Good afternoon and welcome to another edition of Inside New Orleans Sports, live from our Pontchartrain Production Studios. I'm your host, Eric Asher. Over the next hour, we will cover all the home teams as we're kind of getting a little bit of a dead period in sports, but not quite there yet. And to break it down for us, one of the best we have, again, from CrescentCitySports.com, all access on Nash 106.1 FM, and the voice of the UNO Privateers, Jude Young, is our guest tonight. Jude, welcome to the show. Thanks so much for being with us. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what's happening over at CrescentCitySports.com, your radio show, and not too far from now, UNO will be tipping it off, getting ready for basketball.
You know, it's crazy. We're halfway through the calendar year now already. Time flies. But still, year-round, lots to talk about with CrescentCitySports.com. Our big project this summer, working with a lot of the local high school baseball programs, the Crescent City Sports Prep Summer League. This is the end of the regular season at the end of this week. Next week we have the playoffs, and we're streaming those games from Lutcher, involving programs from Jesuit, Rummel, John Curtis, and St. Charles Catholic. Power programs, state championship pedigree. Should be a lot of fun. That's next week, so check that out on our website. As long as we've got things to cover, we're going to be all over it, including the Pelicans and their summer league, and going into free agency, even though they shouldn't be too busy. The Saints are just 4 weeks away from training camp, and more news will be trickling out before we get to the big start of that in Metairie. And of course, our high school coverage year-round, preparing for the high school football season. We have daily previews, sometimes 2 a day, of high school teams, not only in New Orleans, but all around the state, so we keep really busy there. And as you mentioned on the radio, after your show, All Access, Ken Trahan and I split those duties. I'm always on Tuesday nights. That's in the 6 o'clock hour on 106.1 FM.
Start with the Saints. Again, you mentioned about 4 weeks out from training camp. It's all over the place. I think that local media, fans, really feel pretty bullish about this team. This team has a chance to really do something this year. I think you look around the country, and a lot of the national correspondents don't feel the same about the Saints. And look, in one case, I was thinking about this the other day, Jude. You know, if Jameis Winston was on the Carolina Panthers, right? How would we be feeling about Jameis Winston? Would we still be saying, well, you know, he was behind Breeze for a year, he was under Peyton for 2 years, he really looked good in the first 7 games last year, and we're going to base everything on that. So from a national perspective, you know, the 7 games is a blip.
Right.
They're looking at the body of work at Tampa. And of course, from that standpoint, it's probably one of the reasons why they're kind of downplaying, the Saints maybe as a Super Bowl contender. It'll be interesting to see again how this kind of plays out going forward with Jameis Winston coming off the knee injury. I go back in my mind's eye and I can remember him at Tampa at times with again that offensive line that was porous, happy feet, right? Not being able to look downfield, not going through his progressions. You got a line that last year was often injured. You've got two guards now in Pete and Cesar Ruiz who have to be able to prove once again that they're capable guards in the NFL and can protect the quarterback. The offense, when you look at the offensive tackle position now, there's going to be a change there with Armstead gone. How much confidence will Jameis have in this offensive line to be able to sit in the pocket and throw the ball downfield is the question. He's gotten better in terms of, again, the wide receiving core. But when you look at this, I guess, from the standpoint of the national media, I can see where they're coming from, even though, again, I believe that the Jameis we saw in the first 7 games last year is something that can be a carryover into this season. What is your take?
You just started unwrapping so much. And there's so much there, and we could just keep going. But just talking about Saints' perception and Jameis Winston in particular, when you look at this Saints team, I think it's pretty obvious that right now they have earned the trust of the local media that goes over them with a fine-tooth comb every day. Even though now Sean Payton is gone, which is a big deal, period, but especially from the 20,000 feet perspective of the national media, there's much more trust locally in the solidity of the entire organization and the fact that most of the coaching staff still intact. A strong coaching staff that, as we know with that fine-tooth comb, went through so much last year and ended up 9-8. Didn't have a lot go their way, including the injury to Winston when the team was playing well, and he went 5-2 as a starter. If just he is available for 17 games last year, no matter what you think about his ceiling, the Saints are probably in the playoffs. And when you look at the roster now, you look at more improvements than areas that were either neglected, which would be harsh to say, or allowed to degrade. They're strong on defense from front to back, and there's no reason why they can't grab a veteran or two in areas like the interior defensive line, or especially at the linebacker position, in order to solidify that area. They're very good on special teams. They're getting their kicker back. Now, he's a question mark until we see Will Lutz back healthy and doing what he did before. But on offense, they are so much better at wide receiver. They still have the superstar running back in Alvin Kamara. They're still pretty good on the offensive line, but the offense was so bad and lacking in personnel last year, they had nowhere to go but up. Adding Chris Olave, adding, obviously, Jarvis Landry as a proven commodity. It looks like Michael Thomas is back on track to at least be some sort of factor that'll be better than what you were trotting out there last year. And you have Jameis Winston looking like he's on track to be healthy. We know how good this team can be. We don't know if they're a Super Bowl team, but we think that they're more solid than most and should be a playoff team if they stay healthy this year. As opposed to, the question about Winston, I don't know if that makes them a Super Bowl contender. But there's a big difference between getting in that group of 14 teams that gets into the playoffs and being a team that can win in the playoffs, win 2 or 3 games to get to the Super Bowl. I don't know if I'm sold on that because we just don't know how Winston's going to respond in that situation. But there's a lot of reasons to think this team's going to win double-digit games next year if they have any good fortune at all.
Yeah, I agree. And we don't know how Winston's going to react until he gets hit. And will he be a guy that'll be favoring the leg, worried about getting hit, etc.? Well, so that'll come in time. But what we do know is, as you mentioned, the wide receiving core was horrible last year. And for a quarterback that was trying to prove himself to a coaching staff, he didn't take a lot of chances because, again, he didn't trust throwing the ball to those guys. So, again, which is one of the reasons why I've always said, the reason why, again, Devin White was able to get his hands on him and hit him was because, again, if you remember, there were about 3 games in a row where he started to run the ball more, something he just doesn't do because, again, he felt more comfortable in, again, moving the sticks rather than, again, putting the ball at risk. I think this year he'll be more apt to be able to put the ball at risk because of the type of receivers he has. Now, look. There's a big elephant in the room, and it's called Alvin Kamara. And I talked about it this week on the radio show. When you look at the situation with the wide receiving core last year, where you had one veteran in Traquan Smith, and the rest really undrafted free agents, you're in the same boat when you look at the running back position. Kamara could be suspended from 6 to 8 games. We have no idea what it's going to be or when it's going to be. With that said, you've got an aging Mark Ingram, and you've got 4 undrafted free agents in your backfield. And for the life of me, I do not understand why that has not been a priority for this team in the offseason. Knowing that Kamara was going to get suspended, and knowing what he means, passing game, running game, decoy, you name it. Again, what he means to the offense. So to me, the number one priority going into training camp now is to identify a veteran running back and bring that veteran running back in that he can coexist with Kamara when he's on the team, but also can take the reps that Kamara would normally be taken when he's suspended.
And I don't think there's any question that the Saints have gone along with the thought process around football that the running back position has been devalued. You don't want to invest a lot there.
I agree.
If you go by committee and everybody knows their role, you can be fine. It's a passing league, as we've heard so many times, and that's absolutely true. And that goes back to the idea that the Saints must trust not only Jameis Winston, but Andy Dalton, to say that we are going to be an offense that's going to be balanced. We're going to throw the ball more this year because we've invested in the wide receiver position. So the running back position isn't as important. You're not going to need Alvin Kamara being such a playmaker and a decoy to make your offense work because you're better at the wide receiver position. I'm assuming that's the mindset, but I agree with you. They've kicked the tires on David Johnson and Minicamp. They've looked at other running backs. There's some veterans that are useful out there that can get you by. But yeah, they are rolling the dice a little bit. They'll tell you that they had Abram Smith, and we've heard that he was a draftable player, and they could have easily taken him out of Baylor with the 6th round pick. And there were so many different running backs in that category that a few were going to fall through the cracks. The Saints fortunately had one they liked that really fits what they want to try to do as a one-cut runner and a complement to Kamara. Wouldn't surprise me at all if he winds up being the number 2 guy, if he can handle the terminology and be trusted as a rookie. That's what they're telling you. We can go that route and we're going to be okay. We needed to get better in the passing game. That's why you invest in the next left tackle of the future. And of course, the draft picks, the trades they had to do to get a playmaker at wide receiver that they could believe as a rookie, and they do believe will come in day one in Chris Olave and be a playmaker. That's going to make the offense go. If the Saints can't throw the ball, and can't throw the ball much better than they did so last year, the offense isn't going anywhere, and it told you the Saints believe they're going to be able to do that with the moves they made because they're still ignoring running back by comparison.
Right, and look, nobody knows what Abram Smith is. We know what he was at Baylor, right?
Right.
Okay.
And only for one season.
Right. And he's not putting on the pads yet. Nobody's hit. Again, it was shorts and T-shirts the last 2 months.
Yeah.
So we have no idea. The other thing is, again, the ability to protect the quarterback, which is a huge thing for a rookie. I mean, can you pick up the blitz? Okay, that's another part of this, and we know that Mark Ingram can do it. We know that Alvin Kamara can do it. We've seen that, and again, to some extent, some of the other guys that are on the roster could do that. The question is, when the rubber hits the road, and when you got to get yards, who's going to get those yards for you?
Right.
Who's going to catch that ball at that backfield for you? And right now, you could say if Mark Ingram was healthy, maybe you could lean on him, especially if it is early in terms of, again, the suspension. But it's rolling the dice. The other big question on offense is, are the Saints better off with James Hurst starting at left tackle and moving Penny to the tackle-eligible position we've seen for so many tackles that have graduated from that position into a starting position and utilizing him in that way? Or having Penny as the starter, just putting him out there, letting him grow again on the job, and then, of course, utilizing someone else in that role. What are your thoughts?
There's no way to answer that question until we get some real information from training camp and the preseason.
The pads.
Right. There's no question about it because he's working on his technique. I'm sure even now in this off time, because he's a rookie and has a chance to start, he's probably putting a lot into those issues that he had with hand placement and where he's placing his feet and swinging out on the snap, because not only does he have a question mark, according to the scouts, of whether Penning can handle the edge rush with his mechanics, just how he comes off the ball, but then being beaten by inside moves because he's a big guy. And once you lose that advantage and let a rusher on you because you don't have that great length that he can work with, it's taken away from you, then advantage the defender. So I think it's going to be something they're going to have a good feel for, but they feel very comfortable with. If we have to start James Hurst at left tackle, we're going to be okay. He played there so much last year, and the offense really didn't miss that much, if anything at all, that you or I could probably see. Yeah, he's a rock-solid vet. it could be an issue of, because you mentioned the guards earlier, where you might be better off for the first year in breaking Penning in, who should be a no doubt about it mauling run blocker.
Right. Agreed.
And can work in a phone booth because he's so big and strong.
And him and Pete on the same side, they're two maulers.
Or he moves into that guard position. If Cesar Ruiz or Pete, particularly with his injury history, gets hurt, you might have to do that, because that might be your best option in getting your best 5 blockers out there. I don't think the Saints are dismissing any possibility. I'm sure in a perfect world, Penning's their left tackle, Hurst is the swing guy, and the rest of their starters from last year slide into place, stay healthy, and play well. But at least you've got another talent and another swing player with the ability of a Hurst to play everywhere on the O-line that you can mix and match and make it work. It may not be what it was in years past when the Saints, you'd look across the board and say, does anybody have a better offensive line?
Right.
But there should be enough pieces there to make it work.
Yeah. And remember, Will Clapp again now with the Los Angeles Chargers, so you don't have that versatility. Throckmorton is an interesting player, because is he a guy that if either guard falters, that you can plug him in and you don't lose anything? And especially if Ruiz, again, continues to be able to stumble and falter at that position.
Well, from what we've seen, the answer to that is no when you say lose anything. But can you get by? Well, they got by last year. He played a whole bunch in the interior offensive line. So maybe he's going to be okay in that role. I don't know. But there'll be a lot of competition there on the roster to see who that main guy is. But he clearly has an advantage moving forward. And one wonders if he's going to cross-train even more at center, because Clapp is gone and because they really don't want to have to move Ruiz from right guard to center if something happens again to Eric McCoy. But if you're trying to put your best linemen out there in their best spots, we've talked quite a bit about how maybe Cesar Ruiz really is just a center.
Right.
But you have Eric McCoy, and you created a problem with drafting and projecting, and the latter didn't work out. So there's a lot of questions there, but if you're the Saints, you know injuries are going to happen. You're going to have to mix and match, and you better believe in your talent evaluation, particularly when you've leaned so much on undrafted talent, that you can have enough there, especially on the interior like we're talking about, that if something happens, somebody's hurt, that you can move forward and protect the Jameis Winston and give him the ability to succeed and trust with that surgically repaired knee that he can step up and make throws in the pocket.
Another question mark is the tight end position. Talk about it.
I really like the fact that Adam Troutman came on before he got hurt late last year. I didn't like the growing pains. He was a substandard player the first half of last year, but I think the talent's there, and going from playing part-time and not being in a featured role year one out of an FCS school that wasn't even a scholarship FCS school, and then having the whole role of the #1 guy thrust upon him, he didn't react well. This is where the rubber meets the road in year 3, and I think the Saints feel like he's going to step up and be that complete tight end. Will he be a superstar? Probably not, but will he be a reliable player? That's all they need. Can he help them move the chains and be as good a blocker in year 3 as he was in year 1? He even regressed a little bit in that area simply because, you know, it's Murphy's Law. It hit him pretty quickly. Everything was going wrong. He wasn't catching easy passes. You get down on yourself. So mentally, he's got to prove that he's ready to go. If he is, they'll be fine. I think Nick Van Ed is the #2 guy. They feel comfortable with him. He just happened to get hurt. But he can block, and he can catch the easily catchable balls. He can make things happen in the red zone because he's got that length that you want from a big tight end. And then all these quote-unquote queen tight ends, these guys you want to split out, led by Taysom Hill, Jawan Johnson. You and I talked about the undrafted free agent as well out of Pitt, who maybe he is a guy in Lucas Krull who could step up and be somebody and be a little bit more there. Maybe injury is the only way that he gets that opportunity, but at least they have a lot of talented athletes who can be threats as pass catchers that can get out there and compete, and they didn't have to invest a lot overall in the position over the last few years to get there.
They see Taysom's going to be the H tight end. What role do you see him taking on? Will he play some running back? I mean, is there a possibility when Kamara goes out, they put him in the backfield running back? Will he continue to play that quarterback position around, around the goal line, or when they need a first down, that quarterback power? Is he going to be? He's not a bad blocker, but I don't know if you want him out there blocking for you all the time. But I mean, is he going to take on the Josh Hill role? What do you think his role is?
I think we know we're going to see him in short yardage and goal line, at least in that quarterback role, because it's been so effective. I think there's no question that they could look at a couple years ago before Breeze retired. What you were seeing from Hill is somebody who's capable of matching up one-on-one and getting open and maybe even doing so deeper down the field. Exploring that and see at his age now, in his early 30s and after the injuries, if he can still provide that for you. You just got to get your money's worth somehow. Because of the concussion concerns, though, he was a dynamite special teamer. Fortunately, they draft and pick up undrafted rookies year after year and have fines there that they don't need to use him in that role. But they're still paying him as a guy who's going to make 8 figures. You got to figure out a way to get the ball in his hands, right, or to use him as a decoy, give you that misdirection ability in some ways. Who knows how they're going to use him, but I think this is where Pete Carmichael, because of the experience with Taysom Hill and the fact that you know he can make things happen, can get creative here and show what he can do, maybe more with him than any other player on the roster post Sean Payton around to call the plays.
Now, again, the Liz Frank injury is something you have to worry about as well.
Yeah.
Okay, especially at his age.
Right.
And we'll see again how he's going to bounce back from that. But it'll be interesting to see again what his role is. Let's go to the defensive side. Peyton Turner announced yesterday he is medically cleared to play. That's great news. He has to be a force here. I've talked about it over and over again. Jude, you and I talked about it on this show as well. You know, to me, so much pressure on Cam Jordan to be everything every week. And at his age, you cannot continue to be able to put that on his shoulders. By this time, Davenport, Turner, Granderson, they have to take some pressure off of him. Okay? If anything, they got to be the guys getting the double team and allow him to single up. You know, getting some inside pass rush is going to be the key as well. I like the addition of Street. I think he's going to help this team a lot. Talk about the defensive line. A lot of people believe that's the strength of this team. Again, I think it's a very, very good defensive line. But Davenport and Turner have to show up this year.
Well, they will determine how strong this defensive line is, because its strength is in its ability to physically dominate with depth. We didn't even mention Tano Passanwa, who got hurt last year after playing really well. The Saints found him because he was a small college guy that it always seemed like he was going to be somebody who benefited the second team he played on in the NFL. The Chiefs gave up on him. He was playing really well and was providing something on the interior of the line as well. So you mix all those guys, including the ones you mentioned, together, it still comes down to those first-round draft pick investments. They need to be
multiple first-round picks.
Correct. They need to be guys who can step in there and give you a whole lot and cut down on the number of snaps over 17 games that a Cam Jordan plays so he can be his most effective. And we know that Cam Jordan was better when what? Marcus Davenport was on the field, which wasn't all the time, hasn't been all the time, but when he was a factor. Jordan's life got easier. And when David Onyemata came back from suspension, another threat up front. They need all these pieces to be available because there's not one Aaron Donald there, but there are a lot of above average to sometimes great players that can mix and match and give the Saints what they've had the past few years. Defense doesn't work, even as good and deep as they are in the secondary right now, if that doesn't happen up front, because the Saints aren't a big blitzing team, because they can rely on what their front four can do. Yeah, it's got to be Turner. It's got to be Davenport. They're both coming off of surgeries, and it seems like Turner is Davenport Jr. Right or wrong, he's going to get that label because he's physically like him. He fits the Saints mold, and he comes right in the door and has injury issues.
And also 2 first-round picks for him.
Right, exactly. So the investment's there. They need to step up. If they don't, because they can't stay on the field, and that's the only reason why they wouldn't, then the Saints are going to have problems. They're not going to be as good defensively as they're depending on to compete for the division.
And then there's a ripple effect.
Yeah.
If you can't get it done up front, it affects the second and third levels, no matter how good you are in the defensive backfield. Let's talk about linebacker. I'm still campaigning for an opportunity to be able to bring back Quan Alexander. Doesn't look like it's happening. We'll see how it plays out. Only because, not so much again really for depth purposes at this point. I think they pretty much made up their mind. Pete Werner's going to be their starter.
And they should.
Okay.
He earned it. He was terrific last year.
And DeMario Davis now has his extension. So again, that has been solved, whatever. But we know there's going to be injuries. And can you count on Caden Ellis? Can you count on Zach Bond? And right now I'd say no, you can't.
Right.
So, I mean, you need another veteran. A guy like, and I don't know if Quan can what he can. He hasn't gotten any real feelers. What can he demand on the market here? So
he's waiting around for injuries, just like we're talking about injuries are going to come, because he's looking at 32 opportunities, not just the one here. Even though he has liked playing here. looking at Joe Schobert during minicamp was good. You believe he's still out there.
Yes,
so
he is.
and there's a few other veterans that can fill in. You're going to have some sort of drop off.
You need
even
one,
with
right?
Alexander. Yeah, they're going to get one.
Right.
I do not believe, unless, say, the 5th round pick Jackson winds up impressing.
Yes.
You know, maybe he does.
Right.
Because he is a smart player, and maybe he was underdrafted because literally just length and the fact that he was a group of 5 player, even though he was a group of 5 conference player of the year.
Yes.
Maybe he wins that job. The Saints are keeping their options open because when you talk about backup and you talk about the linebacker position, it's simply like running back depth isn't the priority it used to be. And definitely on the defense, it is the running back position of the defense. You don't carry as many as other positions, and you don't feel like you need as many to get by.
Right. Marcus May is the question mark in the secondary, not for his ability, but how long will he be out on the suspension?
Right.
Other than that, that particular position group seems stacked.
It is, and P.J. Williams coming back makes it a comfort zone there, whether May or Tyrann Mathieu isn't available for whatever length of time. And they've just drafted so well there, and they're good with undrafted free agents. You know, Bryce Thompson was a revelation apparently in OTAs and minicamp. He's going to play somewhere. We could still see Alante Taylor, even though they see him as a corner. He physically fits that mold and competing out there. If they needed him, they could move him around too because he has safety qualities.
Right.
I just think that the depth there between corner and safety is the envy of the NFL. The Saints have done so well with finding their type. Some have questioned the defensive line type we just mentioned. You're 6'6", 6'7", long, you know, 275,
They've been
280
injury
type
prone.
guy. Right, because there's more of a target area, I guess you can say there, that body type. You could argue. But at the same time, in the secondary, because they're finding the mold to fit their defense, they just keep on keeping on. And now cornerback has to be, with a Bradley Roby, I'm shocked he re-signed.
Me too.
I feel like he could be starting for half the teams in the league easily as a solid number 2, and he's your number 3 on the outside. They really have done a fantastic job, and there's no reason to question how things are going to work out except one thing. May and Mathieu need the reps so that not only do your defensive coaches know how you want to use them together, but they need to be able to communicate and work together, because the Saints defense at safety is going to change dramatically from not having that true center fielder in Marcus Williams and more of a true strong safety in late career Malcolm Jenkins. Both of these guys can play both roles. It seems like the Saints kind of targeted May to be more used around the line of scrimmage, but May's best numbers, if you believe in all these analytics, are in the deep third of the field and being able to play that more free safety role. And we know that Tyrann Mathieu's best is the closer to the football that he is. So maybe we see that. Maybe we see more too high split safety looks. That's become the rage around the league, to match up, not give up the big play. They need to be out there so the Saints can figure that out. And again, in pads is the only real way 11 on 11 to know for sure.
Saints got about $9 million in the cap right now. That's money that can be rolled over if necessary. They paid DeMario Davis, which needed to happen. They've got 2 more players that are looking for contracts. Deontay Hardy has got a $3.2 million tender. He's the second highest paid wide receiver on the roster. He makes more than Jarvis Landry.
Right.
So the question is, again, will he play receiver as much as he did last year? Is he more effective if, again, you're not utilizing him as a receiver, just maybe as a guy that can help you stopgap as a weapon? And then what is that worth?
It's a big question because you don't add Chris Olave, you don't add Jarvis Landry when you're already paying through the nose for Michael Thomas.
Right.
If you're going to use him as much as we saw him last year when he was healthy and available and not suspended, I don't know how they're going to make it work. He's got to be basically a gadget player, in part because of his size and the durability question. And you don't want to lose any of him and what he can bring you in the return game as well. I think he's a matchup guy. I think he's like Taysom Hill. He's a chess piece. You try to find those vulnerabilities against the defense using his speed. And he can get open deep. And we saw Jameis Winston find him on a couple of occasions down the field. Having that extra guy to stretch the field who isn't a top priority for the defense, but still somebody that you have to account for, just makes the Saints offense more potent. That said, how much is that worth? I don't know. The thing about really good return guys is it's very rare outside of maybe the best to ever do it. And we know what Hester was able to do for so long in the NFL. They couldn't find a role for him offensively consistently. You don't know when those guys are going to fall off a cliff. Usually their window of opportunity to be really good is only a handful of years at best. The Saints have to determine how effective he is this year, how healthy they think he's going to stay moving forward, and I think it's a real wait and see with that.
Going back to the running back position for a moment, is it a situation where Hardy is now maybe helping on and running some of the plays that Kamara ran when he's out? Will we see Taysom maybe doing that? Is that their thought? Again, we know that there's been rumors out there of the possibility of Kareem Hunt. Also, the running back out of Vegas, Kenyon Drake.
Yeah.
Do you think that is a possibility, maybe trading for one, or maybe utilizing what they have?
It's 100% a possibility. We saw them have to trade and get Mark Ingram back in the season last year. It wouldn't surprise me if that happens again. But at least those options, for the most part, maybe a Hunt would be a really expensive acquisition.
Last year of his deal, I think I saw it yesterday. I want to say $6 million, right around there.
Right. So as far as what you would be willing to give up for him for such a short period of time, but at the same time, if you feel like you really need to bolster that and have another weapon, go ahead and do it. I have no doubt the Saints will be willing to do that if they find a need at the position, as they should. If none of these other, let's call it what it is, bargain bin attempts don't work out.
Final one is C.J. Gardner-Johnson, $2.7 million this year, unrestricted free agent next year. He's been campaigning, in the offseason. He's the best nickel back in the league. He's the campaign to try to bring players in. Do you think they get a deal done with him before the season starts?
I think they really would be wise to do so. I think that not only what he brings to you at that position, playing that nickel role, knowing that he can be versatile and move into a safety role if you need him to because of his great ball skills. He's a sure tackler. He's great in space. And the attitude he brings to the team, there has to be an added price to that. He gives this defense teeth. He gives it this confidence that, you want that mix of quiet veterans who do their job and a couple of dogs out there. He's definitely that, and that swagger that he brings, as you mentioned, I think it's special. He's good, but he backs up the talk. And that's what's important. He rises to the challenge. He plays his best games against teams like Tampa Bay when he knows he needs to come to play and gets right in Tom Brady's face. And everybody feeds off of that.
Sure they do.
The Saints have to put a monetary value on it, but I think the fact that he's young enough, you can give him a nice long-term deal with that contract flexibility they always build in. He is well worth the investment. And you compare him to a guy like Hardy. Nice player, really nice player, but you can replace what he does. Hard to find a player quite like Gardner-Johnson.
I agree. All right, you're watching Inside New Orleans Sports. Jude Young is our guest from CrescentCitySports.com, the voice of UNO Athletics, and also, again, all access on 106.1 FM each and every weekday at 6 p.m. Jude is on Tuesday, but also comes in on some other nights. We'll take a quick break. We come back. We'll touch on the Breakers. Then we'll jump into some Pels, and then we'll talk a little bit about what's going on with the college game. All that coming up here on Inside New Orleans Sports. I'm your host, Eric Asher. Stick around.
Burkhart's Air Conditioning, Heating, and Refrigeration has been family-owned and operated since 1989. Burkhart has energy-efficient solutions and offers brands such as Mitsubishi ductless AC units and Amana, the only manufacturer with a lifetime unit replacement warranty. Burkhart's offers maintenance bundle packages that include servicing your AC, generator, and tankless water heater. For more information on the services Burkhart's provides, visit acpromise.com. Burkhart's Air Conditioning, Heating, and Refrigeration, providing comfort for life.
Located at 3701 Iberville Street in Mid-City is Katie's Restaurant and Bar. Open 7 days a week, Katie's offers daily specials for lunch, dinner, and Sunday brunch. Serving New Orleans cuisine such as fried shrimp platters, grilled redfish, and a fully stocked bar. And don't forget about our expanded event seating and local entertainment. Featured on the Best of Food Network's diners, drive-ins, and dives, Katie's Restaurant and Bar.
Welcome back to Inside New Orleans Sports. I'm your host, Eric Asher. Jude Young is with us from CrescentCitySports.com and so much more. All right, let's jump into it quickly with the Breakers. Their season ends losing to the Birmingham Stallions 3 straight times during the season, never able to get over that hump. They made the Final Four in Canton. The question is the future of the league first, with, again, 2 other spring leagues and the CFL going at the same time. We know it's made for TV, NBC, Fox, etc. And then will they move back to their namesake cities next year? They have not been committed on that yet.
No.
If they do, where do they play here in New Orleans? And I mentioned this on the radio show this week. Everybody wants to talk about the Breakers. Look, let's know the history of the Breakers. Okay, first they were the Boston Breakers for 1 year, then 83. 84, they came to New Orleans for a year when Cannizzaro bought them. Then, of course, when they wanted to move to the spring, the USFL, they ended up, again, Cannizzaro ended up moving them to Portland, where he took on a partner, and of course, eventually the USFL dissolved. So you can't say there's some kind of emotional attachment to the Breakers here, but it is what it is. I watched some games. They had New Orleans, on their chest, so I watched some games. If they are to come back to New Orleans, where do they play?
We've talked about this. Yeoman is the best option for them.
Right?
But here's what complicates it.
Right.
So this is what we do know. Fox Sports, they own the league. Mm-hmm. They're very happy with their advertising revenue, even though the ratings were a little under the mark, apparently, of what they wanted, according to reports. But Fox says they've already sold over half the advertising spots for next season. The league's definitely coming back, but they haven't determined where these games are going to be played. But it sounds like they want to have, as opposed to one hub, which was Birmingham this year, they might want to have up to 4 hubs, but definitely thinking maybe 2 in each division as like the best possible scenario if they could make it work. So that would mean one more in the South. They're not going to leave Birmingham, so maybe New Orleans could be that hub. But if that were to happen, that would be bad, because I don't think our friends around Yeoman and Tulane's campus want to have multiple games every week at Yeoman Stadium at another part of the year, which is supposed to be quiet, no traffic concerns, no noise concerns, etc. So that would need to be worked out. And, ideally, and we've said this 1,000 times, if Tad Gormley were a nice stadium and not falling apart overall and had been kept up and modernized, it'd be fantastic for all sorts of projects, not only football, but on the, now it's been 30 years since the Olympic trials here, being able to host more events. Maybe that would be something that Fox and the league would be willing to invest in long term, but I don't see it right now. So that could hurt New Orleans if they go to the multiple hub way. It would be better because there was enough of a connection locally that people were paying attention to the Breakers, that let them establish that for another year away from here, and then see how the stadium situation and the stability of the league go, and revisit this in 12 months to have a better shot for, if it finally does move here, it could actually work.
What about Zephyr?
Well, that's the long-term question, but you and I have been told that $45 million project, it's hard to imagine it being done in any less than 3 years. There's a lot of hoops for it to go through. The idea of a covered grandstand, refitting it for not only the rugby team, NOLA Gold, but high school football would certainly work for spring football, and other events from lacrosse to you name it, soccer, and bringing a USL team, which is the level below MLS. I love the idea, and I think the location's perfect to support all of that, but the fact that its timeline doesn't fit what the Breakers' needs might be, again, I think timing's going to be everything for the New Orleans Breakers concept.
And I'm going to just throw this out that maybe, again, the networks wanting to do something, maybe there's some money there that's available to maybe move that project forward a little bit quicker.
Right, and again,
it's definitely needed. It's needed now.
It is, but next year is a really sort of a tender spot for what the USFL is trying to do, because you mentioned the XFL is fully planning to come back, and that competition for those eyeballs. It's one thing when it's a nice novelty you can throw on a football game because you're a football fan that time of year, but when it's oversaturation and near the end when the CFL comes along based on their timeline, you're only going to get so much attention span to minor league football.
No doubt. All right, let's shift gears to the Pelicans. The big thing is, pardon me, today is the start of free agency. The legal tampering period. You can sign, you can agree to a contract with a player, becomes official on July the 6th. It's also, again, the first day that the Pelicans can offer the max deal to Zion Williamson. What do you think will happen?
I think Zion Williamson will sign a max deal that is somewhat team-friendly because of the concerns about his long-term viability health-wise. I think that's going to get worked out. I think everything's coming up roses for the New Orleans Pelicans. You talk about free agency as far as outside the organization. I don't think there's going to be much done there because their roster is already full. I think they just had the second straight banner draft.
Right.
I just think that the two guys they're able to grab from the draft that are going to be available
Dyson
this year.
Daniels, E.J. Liddell.
I just love them because Daniels is the guy that made sense to me at the 8th pick. Everything works out, he's available because he's going to slide right in and grow on the job and be a good player on both ends of the court who can complement your stars, who can still grow and get better as a scorer himself, and has the ability with a near 7-foot wingspan. He's grown to be nearly 6'8", and has shown the understanding of how to be a really good defender. So that's just another guy who's going to fit into all sorts of different rotations so you can match up with other people and give them problems. Scoring shouldn't be a problem. He should be a complementary piece because Zion Williamson is back. You've got C.J. McCollum, you've got Brandon Ingram, and that's where E.J. Liddell is so exciting. I totally agree with the Pelicans. He should have been a first-round pick. There's a lot of Draymond Green in him as a defender. That's what I love about him. 6'7", another long wingspan, and if you go back and look at him in college, you're more impressed with his improvement on the defensive end than even the offensive end, where his range got better. He can score in the lane. Just go back and look at their game against Duke, Ohio State. When he smothered Paolo Banchero, the #1 overall pick in the draft, yes, a couple of years younger, but he ate him alive because Liddell understands, and there were some scouting videos he did online before the draft, he understands how to use his length, how to match up with quicker guys so he can be switchable. That's what Daniels figured out in the G League. His ability to be able to match up with bigger and smaller guys, use his length, have the right footwork, know how much space to give one guy versus another. Those are things that some players never figure out, and these young guys already have it. I think they're both going to be players. They need to make room for E.J. Liddell. Even if that means saying bye-bye to a Jackson Hayes, I would do that because I think he's going to be somebody that makes you better and would be worthy of playoff minutes next year.
Also, again, Karlo Matkovic, the Croatian, they're going to draft and stash him, which I think is a good move for them, because, again, he has an upside. A lot of talk about Devontae Graham and again moving off of him. I was all in, could still be all in. Again, when you look at how he performed last year, but remember he was brought in to do space to have the court space because of Zion. Do you hold on to him, saying, look, let's give it another shot and run it back with the new team and see where he's at, or is that salary spot more precious to this team to be able to package him and try to move off, maybe with a Garrett Temple, to move off and open up those spots? So again, you don't have to move off of Jackson Hayes, and you can bring in an E.J. Liddell.
Well, with 2 fully guaranteed years left on his contract and a little bit of chunk, maybe like $3 million,
$2.3 million
for the last
year.
He sits right now off the season he just had as a negative asset. And you don't have any rush. If a big deal comes up and his salary can play into it, sure, do something that you feel like you're adding the piece that really you feel like is going to get you there. I don't think that's going to happen here this offseason. So why not let him see if he can rehab? Apparently, a significant chunk of last season, he was also dealing with injury.
Had a hip injury, right?
Right. So you're talking about a guy that could slide in and get back to being a near 40% three-point shooter like he showed at times with the Hornets. And be a better asset, help you win some games, and still be able to use that salary to make a big deal in season. Remember, they don't have to do anything during the offseason. When we saw last season, before the deadline, you could come up with a quality player like C.J. McCollum that moves your operation forward. I don't think there's any rush at all unless a dream deal comes their way.
Yeah, because you can always do that at the trade deadline. When you're going to, teams are searching to put packages together, you can always move off them. I am now leaning toward holding on to him and giving him another opportunity. Especially again now with a in-shape Zion, which is really something good to see right now.
But they are facing the crunch of only having 15 roster spots total available once they get into the regular season.
Do you buy out Garrett Temple?
If you have to. You don't want to have to give up too much throwing in picks. I mean, it's one thing to throw in a couple second-round picks or something to be able to dump him. But at worst comes to worst, if you can make the salary cap work, you can just buy him out.
Yeah, buy him out and just extend it.
I think he has to go, and I really do feel like even though he can help you this year, I don't think Jackson Hayes fits the culture of this team. I think we talked about in a different way, Passanwa for the Saints being the guy who's maybe benefiting his second pro team. Hayes might be the guy who does that too because of his maturity issues and his growth as a player. I think he needs to mature on a timeline that doesn't fit this Pelicans team that wants to contend for a top 4 seed in the West. They'd be best to create that space so that you were able to bring in enough players in the front court as your backups who were willing to do the dirty work. Like Nance, like Liddell. You want those guys to be able to play because they fit what you're trying to do, and you're going to get a consistent effort out of them every night, whereas Hayes, he's quite the roller coaster.
Let's shift gears to college baseball. With the transfer portal open until July the 1st, where you can transfer without having to be able to sit out a year. These next 24 hours are going to be critical for a lot of teams. The transfer portal has helped LSU in a lot of cases, but it has bitten Tulane and UNO this year.
Sure it has.
Okay, talk a little bit first of all. UNO loses one of their best players, if not their best player on the roster.
Definitely their best returning player in Amani Larry, who should have been Conference Player of the Year and should have been all defense, but the Southland does weird with their voting. They skew towards the regular season champion. He was the best second baseman in the league by far and could do everything. JUCO transfer out of Bossier City. Yeah, it's a tough loss, but he's going to Mississippi State.
Right.
Yeah, and you look at Tulane losing their closer.
Right.
And he's going to Georgia. I mean, they're going to
DeVito. Zach DeVito.
Right. Zach DeVito, who really came along in 2 years, saved 14 total games. He's gone. That's going to keep happening. If you're not on that level, you're going to get poached for guys who don't go in the draft. Now, Larry might wind up getting drafted. Some scouts have told folks at UNO that he really caught people's eye.
Okay.
So he could wind up not making it there, and that's also true of the big picture when we look at what LSU's been doing. And to clarify, you have to be in the portal by the end of this month to be able to play next year. And more guys are going to be jumping in at the last minute, I'm sure, because the draft isn't until All-Star Week. For the big leagues this year. They moved it there, so those guys are going to need time, and all these programs are going to figure out what signees from the high school ranks are we getting on campus, JUCO ranks as well. So there's so many moving pieces that are going to be going on in the next 4 weeks. It's going to be hard to keep up with, but LSU is one of those shoppers, and I'm sure they're using NIL to some extent. Jay Johnson, even though he just got a great hire as a pitching coach, he was working without his top 2 assistants and still reeling in these stars. LSU's got so many guys that are committed now to play baseball for them next year, but that attrition is going to hit after we see what happens with the draft, and then they'll have a certain number of players coming in to compete, which could be up to 40 spots. That's how it's going to be. It's back to the way college baseball used to be when there was free transferring before it went across the board and you couldn't do that, and the big programs are always going to eat. They're going to get your players that you developed, unfortunately, if you're a UNO and a Tulane, and they're going to be able to say, better opportunity here. Oh, and by the way, a little extra money, too.
That NIL, no doubt. Theo Banks from Tulane is in the transfer portal, hasn't made a decision yet. Bradley Nargent and Jackson Lynn are going to stay at Tulane. You mentioned LSU. If I understand, Jay Johnson has been on the road here.
Yes.
Okay, he's been out again.
And bringing in players and getting them to visit when they've come in. They've committed.
Jack Pineda, the Baylor 300 hitter, again, is committed to LSU. Tommy White, National Freshman of the Year, again from North Carolina State, 27 home runs last year. He's committed. Also, again, Christian Little, the Vandy pitcher, who throws 90+. Dylan Trabecki, the right-handed pitcher out of Creighton. Carter Young, the shortstop out of Vandy. And yesterday, Thatcher Hurd, the pitcher out of UCLA. And then the biggest coup, which is really mind-blowing, I got to say it, I've never heard of this before. Grabbing Wes Johnson from the AL Central leading Twins as a pitching coach and bringing him to LSU in mid-season, I don't think I've ever heard of that before.
Well, you can outbid for a major league pitching coach. That's what we learned. Because even though his base salary is only $30,000 more than what Johnson was making with Minnesota, the whole package, you know how baseball camps are manipulated to pay coaches, for example. The whole package LSU offered doubles his salary. He's going to make around $700,000. And Johnson, who did a great job at Dallas Baptist and then in the SEC at both Mississippi State and Arkansas, he wants to be back in the college game. I think his end game is to be a head coach. So this is the perfect move for him after, what, 3.5 years in Major League Baseball. I guess he figured he's never going to be an MLB manager, or maybe he doesn't want to be, versus it's it's a more glamorous job, I think, moving forward.
Especially
in a
the
lot of
SEC.
cases, is being an SEC head coach. So it works out for both sides. He's brilliant with pitching. He understands modern analytics and how to get guys mechanics and the pitches they throw and how they use them and tunneling your pitches and everything you need to be able to improve players. It's a real coup for LSU.
Let's talk Tulane football. Again, down year for Willie Fritz. A lot of people believe there's going to be a bounce back year. A lot of people believe it's got to be a bounce back year. What are your thoughts on the Greenies as again, they're in this lull now before fall camp?
Well, you try to figure out what you're adding versus the guys coming back and getting better, and will that mix elevate a Tulane team that went 2-10? I mean, that's the question we have here. I think it will. They're not going to finish that poorly, barring massive injury issues. Renee Nato did a nice piece on Crescent City Sports this week about 10 newcomers, mostly transfers, that are going to make a difference. It's adding speed to the team. It's adding experience on the defense. And it's mostly the speed at the skill positions on offense and back-end talent, which is a crucial combination. Tulane needs to be fast to play in a league that is so speed-oriented and high-scoring oriented like the American is. So they've done that. But I said it last time I was on your show, which was recently, it's all going to come down to Michael Pratt. How much improvement is he going to be able to make to be a guy that Tulane can hang around and win these shootouts? Not falter in the second half when they're in the game and they need to match scores. He needs to be better. Receivers need to be more sure-handed. And bringing back this skilled talent that are local high school products who are looking for their opportunity and can burn. As long as they can catch the ball and make plays, and you have Tajay Spears coming back, and Cameron is a really good running back, a power runner. There's a lot of pieces there that this team can be multiple. And another offensive coordinator. Is this going to be the one that works out? All those questions there, but I think the pieces are right there, and it's all going to come down to, can Pratt pull it all together and make it happen?
Before we get to LSU, a couple things. First of all, you told me something in the break about the possible shift within college football with the Pac-10.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, Cam Carroll. I'm sorry, I said Cam Cameron, the former LSU coach. Big news, a prominent reporter on the West Coast following the Pac-12 saying that UCLA and USC are looking to move to the Big Ten. Now, that would send shock waves through college athletics, like Oklahoma and Texas moving to the SEC. It would decimate the Pac-12, and I would guess that Oregon and Washington in particular would have to follow. They're the attractive four out of the Pac-12 that the Big Ten would be interested in, and I'm sure they'd want more than two West Coast schools. So if USC and UCLA are really going, that's going to tear apart that conference. We were talking about, is the Big 12 as it will stand going to be a power conference? Or we're going to have a Power 5, is it really a Power 4? We could be down to a Power 3 by 2024, according to this report.
Interesting how that plays out. Also, there's a report now, Kevin Durant asking for a trade for the Brooklyn Nets.
Interesting and not surprising. He's always looked for the best opportunity. The Nets experiment didn't work out. I'm a little surprised, though, with Kyrie Irving coming back, that he didn't say, let's give it one more go. But he's obviously thinking, I'm not getting any younger. Irving's an unreliable personality. And who's the third star there? Ben Simmons. So the dysfunction may be too much for him to take.
Yeah, maybe so. The biggest question for LSU is who will be the quarterback. And I don't know if we can answer that question right now. But, I mean, there's going to be people lining up in these camps. Walker Howard's camp, Nussmeier's camp, Jaden Daniels' camp, or again, also starter.
Garrett Nussmeier.
The starter.
Miles Brennan.
I'm sorry. I got it.
I'm thinking of all of them in my head right now going, it's incredible to have four quarterbacks. That are that good.
And I do commend Kelly for, again, keeping it close to the vest where all the guys are staying right now. But Walker Howard looks like he's going to redshirt. Can you hold on to Nussmeier if it's going to be Daniels and Brennan? Where do you think they're going to go? What direction? I mean, at this point, it's really hard to know until they get on the field.
If they really feel like it's close, because I think we're talking about close as the guy who takes the most snaps would be between Brennan and Nussmeier. I think Daniels, who has developing to do that he didn't do at Arizona State, despite starting a lot of games, being that change of pace guy and trying to grow and maybe continue to fill out his body because he's such a skinny guy. I think he's understanding the deal here, that he could wind up starting, but he could just be a part-time player, a package player who tries to develop and get himself to a pro job. You know, if it's close between Brennan and Nussmeier, I'm taking the younger guy. No offense to Brennan coming back for his 6th year and showing the willingness to trust Brian Kelly. I'm sure Kelly made it clear, but I'm not guaranteeing you anything.
Right.
And he seemed to understand that. There's some video from the Manning Passing Academy we have on Crescent City Sports. He seems to understand the deal. If Nussmeier is right there, go with the younger guy. He's also more mobile.
Yes.
Not that Brennan doesn't bring more experience, obviously, but it's really not that much more experience. The only question is if you think his leadership skills are above and beyond the other guys, and leadership's important in this transition year, and you know what you're getting with Brennan. He's going to pull the trigger. They have a fleet of wide receivers with Keishon Boutte coming back in particular. They should move the ball and score points. It would be a very conservative move short term for Kelly. But I think Nussmeier would probably have to change his mind at some point, thinking Walker Howard's a stud, and I'm going to have to compete with him without really getting playing time this year. Do I really want to sit around when I can go play someplace else? He may think of doing that. The thing is that it hurts you by picking Nussmeier in August because Brennan, because he's a graduate, could then immediately leave you, and you're down a little bit, but you still have 3.
Yes.
You're okay.
Right, you do. And look, when Brennan's had a chance to play, he's played well.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't knock the way the
He was really good 2 years ago before he had that injury.
Really was.
But it was only 3 games.
Right. So we'll see how that plays out. I'm with you. I agree. If it's close, I think you're going with a younger guy. As long as he's not transferring, you've got that backup. But even if not, Daniels has got experience.
And when it comes down to it, LSU recently finally figuring out how to get real stud quarterbacks in here. I think Brian Kelly has a history of knowing he's able to get the quarterbacks he needs and can get a higher caliber one even than he got at Notre Dame here at LSU. He's not going to worry about, quarterbacks who don't want to stick around and compete. He wants to sign a high caliber quarterback every year that he knows can play in his system, and he's going to trust his ability to do that because that is the center of what's made him such a successful coach as far as strategy goes. He's an offense guy. He's a guy who develops quarterbacks who can run his offense.
Last question, got about a minute. Concerns about losing so many 5 stars in an NIL world right now?
Well, it's a big concern because you know what the 2 big Texas schools alone are doing, what we've seen from Miami, a USC in that race, and the SEC all competing in that area. I think the fact is that it's still an evolving landscape. You can't panic about it short term. You can still go in the portal like LSU did and fill a lot of holes and let the landscape play out as you continue to shape your NIL strategy while the NCAA in general works with schools to try to shape a long-term manageable NIL strategy. Don't worry about the commitments and the rankings right now because you're seeing a lot of schools who aren't where they normally are because there just aren't that many guys committed. 6 weeks from now, you're going to get a better feel for whether LSU and others are having problems with the new NIL way of working.
Yeah, because despite all the conversation out there about LSU taking the next step, they have not.
Right.
Now, again, we're hearing whispers that in baseball right now, part of what we're seeing right now is NIL money.
Sure.
Okay? But again, as far as football goes, being able to compete with, again, Texas A&M, some of the other schools, even Alabama, supposedly LSU's not there yet. We'll see how quickly they can get there. Jude, thanks as always. Certainly appreciate it. Got 30 seconds. Tell the folks about the radio show and, of course, CrescentCitySports.com.
All access, 6 o'clock hour. Ken Trahan and I on 106.1 FM and Nash FM 1061.com. You can catch me every Tuesday night and others filling in throughout the year. UNO basketball, of course, along with baseball on 106.1 FM. And you got to check out CrescentCitySports.com every day. Our coverage continues to grow. High school, college, and the pros.
No doubt. Thanks again for being here. Certainly appreciate it. Thank you for tuning in. Again, remember, there's so many ways to catch our program, so many rebroadcasts. There's a QR code up on your screen right now where you can take your phone and click it. And, of course, it'll take you right to my website or, again, to the WLAE-TV YouTube page where you can always be able to catch the program. But, again, plenty of ways to catch our rebroadcast. You can also catch me on the radio, 106.1 FM, Nash Icon, 4 to 6 weekdays. Listen live at ericasher.com. Also, the TuneIn radio app, the iHeart radio apps, free digital downloads for you, for your smartphone or tablet. Also, don't forget the Anchor app, which is where our podcast is, but our podcast is on all apps now. We're everywhere. Inside New Orleans Show with Eric Asher. Search that. You should be able to find it. Also, want to thank our good friend Jude Young, always there for us when when we need them. Great job as always. Also, our underwriters who make the show possible. Please continue to support the great underwriters that support our program. We thank those underwriters as well. And of course, the WLAE production staff here, which is second to none. Ron Yeager, Jim Dotson, Logan Rafia, Alex Chacon, and my director, William Hill. Thanks so much for tuning in. Happy 4th of July to each and every one of you. We'll see you next week for another edition of Inside New Orleans Sports.